It has been 14 days. I knew that that video was gonna make some waves, but I gotta say, like, what? You know, it's so funny and like stark to me how differently people respond in my real life versus online. Like in my real life, my friends were, supportive, shots of whiskey, a little caution, a few questions, but overall, good talk. But online, fucking dumpster fire. Like, I'm gonna need more whiskey for this. By far the biggest question you all have been asking me is why? Why am I doing this? What are my motives? There's been a lot of accusations that I feel are unfair and assumptions that I feel are unfair, but I will live with it. On the anti side, I've read some very elaborate conspiracy theories about betrayal and greed, sex. And from the feminist side, I have seen a similar tone deafness. Like you guys may have seen some of the things that people posted after that video. I've spent an upwards of 40 hours the last 2 weeks talking to YouTubers on the phone, talking to people on Skype, just having so many conversations about this, and it has gotten to the point where I'm just sort of going round and round and round, trying to explain why I see value in talking to people who are hostile to feminism. If people don't get that at this point, I feel like, I can't do anything more. Some of the background, the personal background, that has brought me here to this point. It has been such a tremendous amount of shit. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. And it makes sense because I haven't really talked about that. It's really hard for me to talk about. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Stuff is personal, it's vulnerable. I need to just be open, so please be decent, internet. In a word, I've seen some shit. I'll start with the feminist side of things. For a while, some of the more fringy aspects of feminism that can be found online have given me pause. I started my channel to share sexuality information, to talk about sexual politics and so on, but over time, just talking about that became harder and harder. It's gotten to the point where, the simplest topics in sex ed, the simplest language even, like male and female, they incite outrage in some people. I did and will continue to do my best to, accommodate people's needs and requests and to respect the feminist conversation, except when it doesn't make any sense. Being anti-science, part of this. Antis would be fair to say, well, you know what, this is where you went wrong, you pandering asshole. But I don't see this as pandering. To me, this kind of stuff, being sensitive and considerate, is just like a good thing to do. And I try to do it to the best that I can, but it got to this point where, at one point I'm listening to like 1 million different people's feelings on this stuff. It got unhealthy, okay? Like, I was obsessing over every word that came out of my mouth, every way I could be misconstrued or accidentally cause harm, and even then, there have always been people who seem determined to misconstrue what I say no matter what. People exaggerating, spreading lies and rumors. I watched these same people go on campaigns to try to get people fired or rejected from their community for relatively minor infractions. Like, this is disturbing to me. To many people that I've talked to on the anti-side, they have stories like this. And anybody who is interested in social justice and, communication and how we have these conversations, this should, be a flag for some deeper inspection, closer probing into what's going on here. Because in my book, this is not feminism. This is bullying. And on a few occasions, it has made me scared for my physical safety. There was this one time I was at a conference, walking out to the parking lot, and these 3 people, feminists, shout me down. They accuse me of contributing to the violent deaths of trans people. What's their reasoning? Well, when I was 17, I made a fan video for Chris Crocker. He uses the T word to describe himself, and I did not know that that was offensive. And I apologized afterward. But, 5 years later, there we were in this parking lot. Not only did they, seem to imply that accidentally using an offensive word is the same as literally killing people, but then they threatened me. They threatened to kick my cis ass. Now, I've seen this shit online, but that was the first time I ever saw it in person. Wow. I have other stories like this. Like, it pains me. I've seen a spectrum of these types of behaviors. To those of you who've been asking, does this mean you're not a feminist anymore? I will always be a feminist. I believe in social justice. I believe in the issues that I've talked about and the causes that I've campaigned for. That is why I'm here. It's because I know who I am and what I stand for. And I know that this kind of shit isn't it. In the background of all of this for me was the antis. Now, I mentioned in my last video that the conversation's a little bit hostile, And when I say hostile, I'm not referring to people being offensive or taking the piss. Based on some of the reactions and questions that I've gotten from the anti-side, a lot of people don't seem to understand that I experienced that side of the conversation in the context of pretty intense harassment. And anytime I've so much as hinted about this to this crowd, to let them know, like, hey, I want to talk to you, but like, look what's going on. People have slammed me and accused me of playing the victim and trying to garner sympathy, being manipulative and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, at what point do I get to be a human being who is talking about a real experience that I'm having? It's not my delicate sensibilities or my dogma that have prevented me from engaging. It's that people have threatened to violently hurt me at public appearances, threats against my family, situations where I'm teaching students how to put a condom on properly and I have to be accompanied by police. And then I watch some of the, more extreme antis go on these tirades against people that I know and seeing how they affect those people, and it's just, there's a lot of toxicity there. I couldn't even answer email from my viewers without having to go through a stream of graphic rape threats. Do you get the picture here? So to the antis who are like, yeah, no shit, we have legitimate points, Lacey. Like, what a fucking idiot. Like, we're not gonna give you cookies for this basic stuff. Like, you need to understand how this conversation looks to people like me, to people on the outside of your bubble. Because this is all I saw every day. And no, it's not the whole picture. Just like social justice warriors bastardizing feminism, this is what anti-feminism looks like to people like me. And YouTubers are not responsible for like crazy shit that their audience does. Of course not. But I do think that if the goal genuinely is dialogue, that people need to be condemning this stuff when they see it. And, being thoughtful not to egg it on. Even without the fringier stuff, these angry pylons on YouTube don't exactly say, let's talk. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I've seen a lot of the same kind of stuff coming from both sides. And both sides see the other doing it, but they don't really want to acknowledge it within their own camp. But I think we can all agree that this kind of shit's uncool, right? Like, it's sociopathic, bit of an overreaction to someone who has very different opinion, right? This is a big part of why I didn't engage for so long, and why I don't think anybody has to either. The reason I originally reached out to the antis in spite of all of this was because I just sort of run out of fucks. Like, I was so depressed, I didn't really care anymore, like I was feeling kind of self-destructive, so burnt out on years of all kinds of craziness. I knew I'd get a bunch of shit for it, but I thought to myself, you know what? I don't really have a choice. It's either this or try to appease everyone. I just gotta do me. I think that my experience speaks to some of the darker sides of the extremism and polarization that has blossomed on the internet in the last few years. The extremism in each camp tends to be the loudest, right? And incites the most outrage. It makes people scared or angry or resentful. There's a lot of emotions in these conversations, and I think that's important to listen to. How do people end up all the way in these, fringy factions? That's something I think about a lot. And in my experience, one of the gateways is often some alienation. It's not that they're a bad, rotten person down to the core, that they're just like an evil misogynist or a misandrist or whatever. I mean, sometimes they are, but we shouldn't just assume the worst of people, or that they can't change, or that we fully understand them based on one of their opinions. Bad time for the camera to die. From where I'm sitting, y'all, good people do toxic shit. Sometimes, across the spectrum, myself included. I believe there is great value in trying to understand someone's intentions, not just their impact. Trying to understand the context of their beliefs, who they are, why they feel this way, and hopefully going out on a limb, making good faith gestures between each other to work toward mutual understanding. This is not the same, in my book, as supporting harmful behavior, as supporting people who harass others online, supporting people who harass others in parking lots. If I removed all the context from every time someone did something offensive or treated me poorly, I would have given up on feminism by now, for one thing, but I also, would be giving up on a lot of people, myself included. So I, personally, see the value in listening, even if it's hard, even when it feels unfair, which again is why I don't think anybody has to engage in these conversations, all right? This is just me. I'm speak only for me. I relate to lots of different types of alienation that are happening here, and I think that alienation can turn into hostility, and hostility is not healthy or productive for any of us. Social media doesn't fucking help. It's like throwing gasoline on a wildfire. As each new outrageous, ridiculous thing is shared through the echo chambers, more and more context is removed. People get more and more outraged about the other, the less complexly they see each other, and before you know it, we've created these monsters out of these sides instead of like seeing the individual pieces here. So grab the pitchforks, I guess. The first, conversation I think we really need to have here is kind of addressing this undercurrent of grievances that overshadow the ideological conflicts. My question for you all, antis, what have your interactions been like with feminists and feminism? Is there any sort of, key moment that caused you to feel strongly against feminism? Feminists, what's your interaction been like with antis? What do you wish that they understood that you don't feel like some of them are seeing? If you're not a YouTuber, you can hit me up on Twitter. That's where I'm having this conversation outside of YouTube.